This is an OPN production.
Welcome to this episode of Olia's Opinions, the new podcast where I take a look at this week's newest and hottest current events, movies, television, and music. I am Armon Owlia. I am a journalism major here at Drexel University in Philadelphia, and it is time to enter the new school of thought. Well, this is the 10th episode, officially. I'd like to thank everyone who has listened up to this point. Y'all know who you are, and I'm very appreciative of my loyal and faithful listeners. So thank you very much. A couple housekeeping things. First of all, we're going to be taking a break in about 3 weeks' time over the winter holiday. So the next episode after this, we're going to be doing one next week and then one final one the week after that. And then after that, we're shutting down for the rest of the year. We won't be back on until I think first or second week of January. So for those who want to listen, unfortunately there won't be. I'll try to update the Always Opinions podcast website, Facebook, Twitter, as much as I possibly can. So that's it for that. Another thing, this is my personal recommendation of the week. Of course, I talked about The Accidental Wolf, which is the television show my brother Damon produces, recently named by the New York Times as one of the 5 must-see shows to watch this week by the New York Times, which I think is just amazing. It's gotten so much critical praise. I've seen it a few times. It's amazing. I love every episode of it. And I think the acting's superb, the writing's superb, everything's superb. If I could give it a hot right now, I would. But one more recommendation I'd like to make. It's a podcast from a person who I actually met over Thanksgiving, and her name is Katie Andressen. She has a podcast called Kid Chronicles. The link of that will be in the description. And it's a really interesting podcast. It's about essentially her status as a mixed child, her father being white and her mother being from Cape Verde, which is off the western coast of Africa. And I think it's actually really interesting, the theme she brings up, as well as sort of the perception of race in this country as well as abroad. So I think it's very well done. Today is the music episode. It's Feel the Music, and we're going to be talking about Saint Wilde's album, What Happens in Between. I think it's an interesting album, and I'm very happy to get into it. And there's going to be some history made with this one. I can guarantee you that. But before we get into that, we're going to take a short break, and with that, we're going to be playing one of the songs off What Happens in Between, called Medellín. It's, as I said, the album, What Happens in Between, available on iTunes and Spotify. So, we're going to take a quick break, but when we come back, the review for What Happens in Between. So, don't go away.
My age, it shows. In just one touch, I lose my load. And I know you're sure you can pick the cash out of my sight. And if I was told you would go around the world to make your love in between your hands and toes. Such an every man that shows you beg for fire.
So that was Medellín by Saint Wilde. This is from the album What Happens in Between, available on iTunes and Spotify. And speaking of which, since this is the first week of the month, and considering this is filled with music, I figured I might as well do a review for this album, What Happens in Between. And let me just bring this up. Last time I discussed this album, I said it was a great album, and I think it is. I mean, to a degree, it is. But then I listened to the album again, and again, and again, and I realized something. First of all, the concept of the album is sort of a album that tells a story. So it sort of like harkens back to the old days of Pink Floyd when they did Dark Side of the Moon. But the thing is, Dark Side of the Moon only worked because each of the songs sort of melted into the other, number one. Number two, there were constant motifs that were played through and that actually really complemented. Like, it actually was able to integrate itself into the track very well as being a well-played track. And not only that, the songs are just very catchy, and they're all very good. The thing is, though, Saint Wilde, and these are all great songs, and these are all, like, a lot of them are, of course, better than others. But the thing was, there wasn't really any motif that brought them together. It was really more song after song after song, with no real connections that they faded into each other. And even then, the pattern wasn't really that consistent. Sometimes they fade into each other. Other times it would just be individual songs. So if you want to do an album, at least you have to keep it consistent. And they aren't necessarily consistent with that. And it sounds like a bad album, but it actually isn't. Because the tracks they put into this actual album are very good. And I actually enjoyed them. I remember even going out for a walk, listening to this. And what struck me was that the song itself is just the songs themselves are very lovely to listen to. In fact, they really just motivated me to keep going, on my merry way, kept motivating me to do the things that I wanted to do. It was beautiful, it was relaxing. But it doesn't really necessarily work as an album. I mean, if you put these songs into other albums in the future, that might work. But if you want to do a Pink Floyd conceptual album like Dark Side of the Moon, the least you can do is find a way to unify them. So what's my rating? It's not a hot. Definitely not. It's definitely not up there as a hot. Otherwise, the songs are good, but the quality in terms of what brings them together, what binds them, definitely not a hot. Nor is it a not, by the way. Because as poorly executed sometimes as it can be, there's still a lot of great songs on there. So, I'm going to do something which I have personally never done before on this show. I'm going to give this a neutral. Yep, a neutral. Which sounds bad, but it's not. It means it's decent. It's not great, like it's a must-buy. It's decent. I think it's decent anyway. It's not terrible. It's not great. It's decent. It's neutral. So, yep. What happens in between by Saint Wilde? Again, I think it could work. Needed some reworking. But honestly, I hope, Saint Wilde, if you're listening to this, take my advice and rework into the next one, because I think you have something here. I think this is definitely a strong start from you. Not the best start, but this is definitely a strong one. Keep it going. I'll be behind you all the way. So that actually is it for the show. For Olia's Opinions, you can follow myself anyway, on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Snapchat, all at House of Armon. You can go to our website, my website anyway, houseofarmon.wordpress.com. And then Olia's Opinions, you can follow us on social media, on Facebook, under Olia's Opinions Podcast, on Twitter, at Olia's Opinions, the website, oliasopinionspodcast.wordpress.com. So that is it. We will see you next week. And that's it, actually, for our School of Thought. And until next time, keep learning, keep loving, keep debating. We'll see you next time on Olia's Opinions. Goodbye.
This has been an OPN production, recorded in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania.